Okay, my name's Tommy, and I'm starting off with this image because it just kind of exemplifies the overall feel of my project, which is about connecting Cleveland with its local food source through the opportunities presented at the Richmond building on its 55th. We've been through a lot of site analysis, so I'll kind of run through it, but so the site's located between the two centers of Cleveland and University Circle. A pro to it is it actually has really great access from the highway to the north and also to the south. And it's very accessible from Euclid Avenue, which connects Cleveland's kind of two centers right now. I took a look at the demographics because the recent census data just came out. And this graphic represents the shift of people moving since 2000, now here in 2011. And if we take a broader look, you kind of see this range happening. So there's a pocket of intensity in Cleveland. So it shows that people are moving downtown, but then people are also moving out to the less dense, more suburban, even countrified areas. But the site is right on the edge where there is growth and there are people moving to the city. So I came to the conclusion that it is close enough to that area that possibly this could be an area where people want to move back to if it starts to get redeveloped. This graphic is showing an increase in vacancy since 2000. The gold is less and the blue is more. So obviously it's a very vacant area around the site. There's a tremendous amount of vacancy, a 40% increase since 2000. So these are just some photos of the surrounding area showing the vacancy. There's houses with pockets of 4 or 5 lots of emptiness. And then along East 55th, it's really lost that street edge. There's no urban feeling. It's vast and open, and there's just pockets of open space. So the problem that I decided with this project was the redevelopment of a 650,000 square foot building in an area faced with a negative perception due to economic decline, shrinking population, and increasing amounts of vacant land and buildings. So the typical solution in a lot of Rust Belt cities has been urban agriculture, which is basically infilling the vacant land with growing area. But my take on this is it's kind of the next level, agrarian urbanism. And what it is it's a more, you design from the start knowing that you're going to have an agrarian community instead of infilling like urban agriculture. So instead of being resultant, it's intentional. And in an agrarian society, it's a community where the entire society is involved with all aspects of food, from organizing, growing, processing, distributing, cooking, and eating. So this idea will effectively change the perception and the image of the area and create a new lifestyle. So this is the site plan for this agrarian community. It has 3 main features, which is the Grow Cleveland facility located in the Richmond Brothers building, Richmond Farms, which is a residential community, and the East 55th Street corridor. So in agrarian societies, residents and visitors are part of all aspects of food, including production, processing, and consumption. So I'm kind of going to break apart the site plan here and show how all those are involved in this design. So the food production occurs in this back area here. This is like the main growing field. And to the southwest side of the site is single-family homes, which mixes with the context. Back in this area, there's a lot of single-family homes. And then as it gets closer to this Richmond Brothers building, the density of housing increases. So there are townhomes here and apartments here. And each type of residence has some amount of production. So the single-family houses, they have a backyard garden and a roof garden. The townhomes have a roof garden, and then the apartments take care of a window box. And it's kind of, the analogy is kind of like to a golf course community where when people move there, they pay a homeowner's fee, and that provides for the landscaping and the upkeep of the area. So if you were to move here, you would pay a homeowner's fee, but that would go to paying a farmer to cultivate this green space in the middle. So you still get the benefits of the beautiful landscape when you look out the window, with the added benefit of you get local food. So processing takes place in the Grow Cleveland facility, and there's also kind of a piece of architecture out in the field that the farmer is able to use to keep the tools, the things you need to farm. And consumption occurs on the corridor to kind of reactivate the street and get that urban feeling back to East 55th. So the businesses that would be along the street here will be food-related businesses that are directly connected to what's being produced here. So there can be bakeries, specialty shops that sell equipment for cooking, and restaurants, things like that. So the community is very pedestrian-oriented. There's paths that allow residents to get directly from their home to the Grow Cleveland facility, not necessarily having to even go out on East 55th. And there's a path that extends to the street to kind of reach out and touch 55th. So as people are driving by, they can get a glimpse in and see what's going on. And then there is also vehicular access just for the necessity of the farmer loading up the crops onto the truck to bring to the building. So then there's the full site plan. So this community kind of needs a new typology of housing. And so this is what the single-family homes could look like. They're still very urban and dense, but you can see between each home, you get a glimpse of the rural farm life behind it. And then this is a view of backyards of the houses. Here you can see that the single-family houses, they each have their backyard growing plot that they take care of, the roof garden, and then what their view looks across is the kind of shared communal area that you would hire a farmer. The whole community hires the farmer. These houses, they also reduce stormwater by collecting it to be used to irrigate the fields. Okay, so then in the building, there's this path from the fields that kind of links directly into the building. So the food that's being produced can be brought right into the building to be processed, or sold in this farmer's market, or incorporated into the retail that will occur up on the street level. There is also indoor parking and a strong connection to the neighborhood. The building is going to use a aquaponics system which combines aquaculture and hydroponics. So what you do is you grow fish on one level, and then using the nutrient-rich water from the fish, you use that to feed the plants, and then the plants clean the water and it's given back to the fish. So it's this very efficient system that reduces waste by up to 80%. And then another big part of food production is the value-added process. So in the center of the building here, on each level, will be value-added processing where things can happen like drying, canning, jellying, and that's what really increases the value of the food that's being produced there. And then on all the floors above, there's office space on the street level, or on the street side. And these spaces range from 1,000 to 6,000 square feet, so they're aimed at small to mid-sized businesses who are kind of forward-thinking and progressive and buy into this idea and want to be a part of it. And then on the third floor and above is the actual hydroponic growing system that kind of circles the back of the building and then has direct access to the processing on each level. To reduce the cost of an indoor growing facility, which could get pretty expensive, I came up with an idea of rotating crops so that you don't have to maintain a consistent temperature throughout the whole year. So in the warmer weather, you can grow things like tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, strawberries, and in cool weather, you can grow things like lettuce, spinach, and green onions, and those all use the same kind of equipment. It's just a matter of what you plant in it. So here's an interior rendering, and this is showing that this facility is really going to employ an array of people and appeals to everyone from your local farmer to the scientist or engineer who is going to really be working out the details of how this works. He loves making and then an important part of this is phasing, because obviously this housing community can't just pop up at once. The first thing that would happen is the building would be converted into this Grow Cleveland facility, where it's just purely a aquaponic growing system. So that will give it basically free advertising, because everyone's going to be talking about it. This is kind of a big deal. People are talking about this worldwide, and we have a chance to do this in Cleveland and put it on the map. So after that happens, then there can be kind of supportive retail that will fill in across the street and work directly with it, and also apartments. And then the next phase is kind of the first half of the housing development, which could be used to test it out before you fully commit to it, and that's Richmond Farms 1. And then the last phase is Richmond Farms 2, which includes some more supportive retail and housing. And then these these street sections talk about just improving the East 55th Street. Right now, it's very vacant, as I said. Most of the times to the right there's parking lots, and to the left there's lawns and buildings that are set back. So the retail that will go along with all this growing can be used to rebuild that urban edge. Also adding bike lanes and reducing the amount of driving lanes by adding on-street parking. And then this site section kind of shows the progression from the residence to the building and then beyond. So the food is grown in these fields, and then it moves into the building to have the value-added processing. It's then sold in the market, and then it can be shipped to institutions, hospitals, and markets. There's a huge variety of places that the food can be sold to in Cleveland. So this view is just showing how doing this will activate this area. There's storefronts all along the first floor where people can go into food source, buy something to eat it outside, or they can head into New Grow to buy some tools that they need for their own gardening. And here's another view of what that would look like. So then the question is, can this really work? And is it working in other places? So some precedents that I looked at is there's a place called New Veg in Japan. And it's a vertical farming facility with all indoor farming. Right now they have, I think it's a 100,000 square foot facility, but they're currently looking to expand into Asia and into the US. Another thing I looked at was Plantagon, which is in Sweden. And the whole reason that they're doing this is from more of a humanitarian, the population is growing, we're running out of area to grow the food. We're going to need to make this shift eventually. So they're starting the process maybe a little earlier than the last minute. We're running out of land, what do we do now? And then lastly is this development called Village Homes in California. It's an ecological community where everybody who lives there knows that they're part of this sustainable ecological development. So this just shows that there are areas that people of the same mentality and ideology can buy into and move in and live together. And something that I really liked that had was an edible landscape. All the decorative trees and things produce food. So they have, with all the different varieties, they have food each month out of the year. So that is pretty cool.
based on the smile on that farmer's face, I figured you were growing something other than food. You make a few bucks. What do you do?
We have that PowerPoint ready too. As soon as it becomes legal.
This was a very well-connected, very well-supported, very well-conceived concept. The idea, or the thread of the idea was integrated into all aspects of it. The site, architecture, the use of the building, all of that. It's relevant. I mean, if you go to Ohio City today, I don't know if this is 3 years old, this is sort of kind of happening in our city on West 25th Street. You know, the old hillside, we're growing things, and restaurants are participating, and shops are occurring that are food related. It's marvelous, and it is the future, and you know, to see it thought through at this scale is really wonderful. I think it's the right place for this to occur. So the only question I really want to ask you about it is the stuff you're proposing to do in the building, is it really possible? Is there enough daylight? You know, can you really, you know, make that happy farmer really happy in here, you know? And because this is about this building. If you take the building away, you can build the houses and you can plant soybeans someplace else.
Right.
You know, I mean, a couple blocks away, Mansfield Frazier's got an orchard that he's going to expand, and he wants to build biocellars, and there's, you know, but this is about a 650,000 square foot building in this particular neighborhood. So talk more about that.
Okay. Derek actually met with Will Allen of Growing Power, who is an expert in this field, and he walked through the building and said that the amount of daylight in this building really will allow this to happen, and it can happen here. And in the examples these two examples, especially New Veg, is completely enclosed. There's no lighting. I think it occupies an old airplane hangar, and because the cost of LEDs and lighting and everything is coming down, it's becoming economically valuable to grow things inside.
Good.
And there's a book you can read called Vertical Farming by Dr. Tom Day. It just has all the evidence that it can actually work.
There was one thing missing here. You didn't have any flow charts. So, but
Do you want to talk a little bit about the costs? We did have, you know, Randy and Shepard that spoke about this from Policy Bridge. I mean, not to make it sound overly rosy, like, of course, this works, there's no problems at all. You want to comment on that at all? I guess what I'm kind of leaning towards the cost of some of the, you know, initial investment.
Yeah, I think his idea
The time frame for return.
right, that it would take a few years for the cost to catch up to the initial investment. But I think once that happens, this is kind of a long-term thing that will move into the future, because the fact is cities are densifying and the population is growing. We are going to need to look for an alternative. And if Cleveland can be the U.S. model, I think that's a great thing that can happen.
I'm going to pick on you a little bit, just because you're the first person who's actually presented something that's like viable and useful for the existing community. But you didn't talk about it at all. Can you go back like 3 slides, I think? Maybe it's not that. Yeah, this one. Consumption. You didn't mention it at all. Like, are you? And I'm looking in the middle of consumption. You know, where's the research that maps out like, you know, where the schools are? Could you be giving them local schools? Like, how could you promote like a health lifestyle for the existing community? And then you know, I was like waiting to see the market research on, okay, well, where are existing grocery stores and farms, and where's the proximity? I'm only picking on you because it's the only hole I see in this actually. Like, it's really good. It's a great idea, and but I think that you talk a lot about like, these new houses that go up and how, but they could have turned into them themselves. What about the other people who are already there? Who could actually benefit from this?
Yeah, and that's one of the things we've talked about, is it is kind of an inward development, and Is that farmer again? That's why this image was really important to me, because the design of this area, these houses are only on one side of the street, but they're designed so that the houses on this side still have a visual connection and can feel like they're a part of it. And then even in the plan, there's walkways, like the pathways aren't just internal. They, the pedestrian access reaches out into the community. It doesn't solely stay in there. There's connections out to the other areas.
I'm gonna, I mean, yeah, I think, I'm just gonna be really critical because everything else is really good. But you're making a wall there, I think. You know, if I like live there across the street, I would really feel connected. So, I mean, that's just.
While you're on this slide, one of my questions was, how many acres are those fields? I mean, is there enough acreage there? You've got a lot of processing capacity, it looks like, in the
Right.
buildings. But are you, on number two, you know, the fields there and the next phase, I mean, how many acres is that?
Well, the idea is that,
Or are you going to have farms all around this area?
well, the idea is that most of the growing to provide the economics of it occurs in the building.
Okay,
And the food that's produced here really is for the residents or
Okay.
to be sold in the market as just kind of fresh produce. But the really kind of money driver is this Grow Cleveland facility.
the building.
That grows on the mass scale. And
Because that didn't look like that much acreage to me.
yeah, I think it's about 8 acres.
Yeah, I had a similar question about capacity also, and I think your answer, for me, I think that, well, first off, I think it's great to have food processing as a sort of a new use of an old manufacturing space, because as opposed to the bicycle or anything else, you know that like you can't make the food and ship it from China. There's like a perishability issue. I think like trying to capture that portion of the market and say like there's certain things that need to be manufactured here because the lifespan is so short. I think that that's like a smart way to think about reuse of manufacturing. Where the project for me, I think I find the weakness is that it really seems like two projects in that, and the way that you answered about the sort of the fields, like this is for the residents and that over there is for the building. I find myself sort of seeing it kind of as two projects, and I kept on looking for moments where there would be symbiosis between the housing and the sort of the food manufacturing, and the fact that even that the farm, you have to hire a farmer to take care of the field, to me seems emblematic of that kind of sort of division, because on the one hand, you have a food processing plant, and then you have like a planned community that's based on, you know, sort of like a natural lifestyle. You could look at things like, say, Seren Bay, which is a planned community that like uses a lot of things like this, but it's in the southeast. And I think I would look for moments, I think I would try to find opportunities for symbiosis between the two as opposed to sort of keeping them separate. And I also think that the project would be, I think maybe I differ from what some other people have said, but I find that I kept on asking myself, like, why here? And I think on the one hand, like, you know, sort of like mapping where the supermarkets or the schools are would be good, but I think that I would actually even look at it much more broadly and systemically about, you know, where are materials coming in from, where are they going, you know, what kind of facilities would be purchasing these kind of food products, and really making more of, like, if you're making this pitch to the owner of the building, like, I would sort of like try to make it crystal clear that this is like a strategic location for this particular use and has to be here, or really could be here for good reasons because of X, Y, and Z. And I think in that case, you have to sort of look a little bit sort of, I think, more broadly and systemically about how all these sort of pieces come together on the site. Because I guess I was also wondering, well, why here? Like, why does food processing have to happen here? Like, yeah, it's good, it's a manufacturing building, there's big space and stuff like that, but, you know, are there, you know, lots of places downtown that would be purchasing your food, or restaurants? And I think like that kind of documentation and that kind of argumentation built into the project would make it much stronger. And I think another thing I would say is, I think it would be great if you could sort of, right now, like sort of propose who would be your project partners, like who are different, like what are different organizations or manufacturers that might be able to sort of jump in right away and be a part of it. And then,
I think that would be that New Veg, because they said they're currently looking
Right.
to expand into the
Right.
US.
right, but are there also even local, are there local operators who might want to be a part of it? And I don't know, I think one of the things, I mean, I was trying to say this about the previous project, but with like the street sections, sometimes I feel like in urban design studios, everybody thinks like, oh yeah, we've got to put banner poles and we got to make like, nice sidewalks. And like with a project like this, I would like want to see like, yeah, we can get our trucks in and out. Like it's like, this is a logistics project. So I think like we can also be more broad about like what our role is as the urban designer and as the urbanist. And it's not always about sort of beautification and making pretty streets. And I think that, in this case, you could think even more about like the logistics of your project and demonstrate that it has what it takes.
Yeah, I think a good conversation for you would be with some people like from the Cuyahoga County Food Policy Coalition. I've been to some of their meetings, like Morgan Taggart and Brad Massey, and some of those people that are really involved with urban agriculture here. They have a lot of that information about how much of our food we grow locally and how much could we grow locally and what would the economic impact be. So I think some conversations and maybe some brainstorming with them as far as some of their analysis would be really good. You may have already talked to them, but there's really a vibrant group of people involved in urban agriculture, and I think they're doing some really good things. So
Yeah, and that's kind of what led me to this too, is that Cleveland seems to have this food culture. Like
Yeah.
we have, I read an article that was talking about how we get all the chefs who can't quite afford rent in New York, so they come to Cleveland and open up these great restaurants. And even if you look at, Tremont and Ohio City, those are where our best restaurants are, and that's what's bringing them back. So there's this food culture that can drive this.
Can I say one more thing about the capacity? I think that it would be, I was saying about the sort of symbiosis between the sort of the housing and the food, or between the two parts of the project. For me, the housing is kind of like, it's not so different from like, say, a single family home that you would find across the street. And I wonder if you really drove the project from a capacity perspective and say like, we need, in order to make this work, we need to produce X, this amount of food per year, and maybe that would, putting that kind of pressure on the site would then force you to sort of maybe create new housing types that are maybe different, different than what's already there. Because right now, like when, in response to what the woman in the front row said before about it being a wall, when I look at the plan, not knowing this area very well at all, it almost looks like there's the same footprint of the houses that are across the street. And I think from a market point of view, like, you'd also want to be able to say like, yeah, people are going to see this as being qualitatively different. And right now, I think you could put it in a pressure cooker and make it a little bit more different and showing them how this is like a different way of living.
I'd like to see a little more variety in the housing too. I know it's just a generic, but to me it looks almost like a wall. I'd like to see a little variety in, the angles or the massing a little bit, but that would help to create a little excitement for me and a little more variety in that.
I'm wondering if you could create, as another sort of program element, we keep coming back to the housing and, the fact that this is kind of privatized. Could that be, something like worker housing? Could this be a center where you could come, where you could learn to be an urban farmer? Could there be kind of a educational component to this as well? Because you've got the processing, so you could have this potential for jobs. You could use this as a catalyst. And, is that maybe, instead of those kind of townhouses, is that worker housing? Is that, something where people can come, or from the community? Is that more of a community garden with community classes?